Welcome to the Hollis Chapman Show, where we celebrate the power of words and the beauty of storytelling. Join us on this journey as we delve into the minds of successful authors and small business owners who have mastered the art of crafting captivating narratives that inspire, educate, and entertain. Prepare to be inspired as we explore the boundless possibilities that come from sharing stories and experiences that shape our lives and ignite our passions. Through heartfelt conversations and insightful discussions, we uncover the wisdom and creativity that fuel these incredible individuals in their pursuit of greatness. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let the magic of storytelling transport you to new worlds and perspectives. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and uplifted as we embark on this storytelling journey together. Stay tuned for an episode filled with wisdom, inspiration, and the power of words. Welcome to the Hollis Chapman Show. Say where stories come alive. Let's begin this adventure together. Don't miss out on the opportunity to connect with some of the most talented and compelling voices in literature today. Tune in and let the journey begin.
Hey, welcome to the Hollis Chapman Show. Happy Friday, everyone. We do have a very intelligent, very dedicated professional joining us today. Our special guest today is an author, researcher, educator, industry professional, and he works in advancing human and organizational performance. Let's welcome to the show our special guest, Dr. Braxton Shaw. Hello, sir.
Hello, Hollis. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Thank you for joining us today on this Friday. I know you were other things going on, so thank you for stopping by with us today. Hey, tell us more about yourself and maybe talk about what you do and talk a little bit about your book too as well.
Sure. So I guess the origin of my life so far has been kind of centered around performance, and I would attribute that to being a student athlete. I was a student athlete all through high school. And I was, I played football and baseball, and I was extremely blessed to receive a scholarship to continue my education and my athletic pursuits. And it allowed me to get my education, my undergrad, and I double majored in sociology and psychology. Ended up with a minor in British literature. I don't know exactly how that happened, but I'm grateful for that experience. Anywho, so I went into the coaching world, and I coached high school football for about 20 years. And that was, I attribute a lot of, things that I do now as far as performance-based things to that experience. I got the ability to have a fortunate opportunity to be blessed to have coaches in my life that attributed to my work. So, and aside that, I'm, as far as the industry is concerned in construction, I'm fourth generation pipeliner. My father was in the industry for 50 years. My grandfather dedicated his entire life to construction industry, specifically oil and gas pipeline construction, and then my great grandfather ultimately gave his life in this industry. So every corner of my life, the way I was developed, raised, it was part of my life, and even though I'm not functioning in the same capacity as my father or my grandfather or my great grandfather, I'm still involved in the industry, and I'm just contributing to making my mark in a different sense, different capacity. So, while I was coaching, and I was working in industry at the same time, I come from the field. I was a laborer. I had the experience of digging dishes and turning wrenches and, swinging hammers and, putting skids down and working with welders and learning the industry of oil and gas and the protocols and the procedures and the trade, right? While I was doing that, I was going to school at the same time. I went back and received my master's from Concordia University, Irvine, in coaching and athletic administration. I thought at the time that I was going to go into the coaching space and make it my life's work, but life definitely had other plans for me. So I never thought that I would continue my education and obtain a doctorate, but I stayed at Concordia. I loved the university. I loved my professors. I loved the work, and I ultimately jumped into the EDD program, which is the Educational Doctorate Program. And that is what ultimately changed my life when it comes to what I do now. So when you're in the program, when you're in a doctorate program, obviously different universities have their, own, protocols and procedures, right? Um, my program asked to put together a study, for your dissertation, right? And so I was asked to come up with two variables, and when you sit back, you ultimately, you're like a superhero. You want to change culture, you want to change the world, you want to come up with something that's very empirical, right? And I sat back and I thought for months, what would be my variables? Like, how can I contribute to the field? How can I make a difference ultimately? And after months of just trying to decipher and decide and weed out exactly what are my variables, I looked at what I was doing at the time with student athletes, right? And so I posed a question. I look at these athletes. I looked at my athletes, and at the time I was coaching at a high school that had these eligibility issues, right? Well, the student athletes had eligibility issues. They were great athletes, but the question that plagues most coaches is like, you can go out there on the field and you can get it done from a human performance aspect, right? I mean, you could be the greatest blessed athlete with talent, with instinct, with skill, but when you're asked to do it in the classroom, they fail miserably. And it's like, why? And I posed that question. So I sat back from a coaching perspective, but also from a researcher's perspective, and I thought, okay, well, what's the issue? What's the problem? And how can we solve this? How can we investigate this? And I leaned heavily back on my master's program, where I had a course in sports psychology, and I loved it, right? So at the end of the day, there was a set of therapeutic techniques called psychological skills training, or PST for short. And again, if you sit down with a performance psychologist, I'm sure they will give you a laundry list of pillars of what PST actually is. But to me, there's four main pillars. One is goal setting, two is self-talk, three is what they call arousal control or stress management, or it's the EQ component, and fourth is the visualization or the imagery piece, right? You can throw in attentional control, but those are the four main pillars that I looked at. So I sat back and I postulated, how can psychological skills training impact high school student athlete performance, performance achievement, and overall, their character development. And I went out and conducted this large model study, and I never thought that I'd walk away with anything significant as far as data is concerned. And when I did analyze my data, I walked away with a mountain of significant data. And I think the aha moment, and I could probably talk for days, and I've said this before, that the data that I still am sitting on, I can probably author numerous works, until the day I die, which is insane. So my study is considered empirical, which is awesome, and the implication piece is what led me to where I am now, right? So I attribute the findings and the significance in what I do today to student athletes, and then from deductive reasoning, I work it all the way back to when I was a student athlete, so. To answer the question fully and comprehensively, I think that, my life has been high performance. I've sat in a world of high performance. I was raised in high performance. I've been around high performance, and that's what my life has generally been. And so why not investigate that and make it my life's work? So.
Outstanding. Thank you for sharing that. I too am a scholarship ball player from the University of Rhode Island, but difference for me, I put all my emphasis and focus on playing. I did not do it in the classroom. I look back today saying, man, if I put half the effort in the classrooms I did playing, it could be a different ballgame. I'm not a very good test taker, and still to this day, I don't take tests very well. But that's, I'm the oldest of four with a single mom, upstate New York, small town, and again, thrilled to get a scholarship to go play ball, and that's what I focus on. I hated going to the library. Back in the day, you had to go to the library and research. Boy, I wish I had the internet to back then where we can research like that. That would have helped me out, because I enjoy researching now. I really do. I mean, looking up information on you, I love that. I love that because it's at my fingertips. I can go and research. I can go see this. I can love that. When you have to make the move to go to a library and go here and go there, I sit there and talk myself out of it every time. So a little bit of psychology about that is that, yeah, Hollis puts too much emphasis on playing, and when did not put enough emphasis on getting off the field and say, hey, Hollis, you may get hurt, it may not happen, you may not go pro. What are you going to do next?
Right.
And that didn't hit me until when it's all over and I did get hurt, I couldn't go any farther. So it's like, shoot. So, yeah. So, congratulations to you with that. I mean, but to this day, I use football and the toughness of football and the ability to keep my position, starting position to football. When things get rough and tough, think about what happened when back in the day. You know, I didn't give up. I got better. I got better and got better. So that leads me to them. Same with you. You just, you learn from your grandfather, your father about getting, you got your hands dirty. They taught you how to be nice in there and not to give up. So good for you. That's great.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Why psychology? Many may represent construction next major innovation. So you're going through things now. You look at the research and stuff like that. So why is the psychology of what you do and what out there in the world represents construction next major innovation? So what do you see in the future for the major renovation?
So that's a great question. I mean, obviously, I think it's stacked and layered. But I think the first thing I think that I would say is that traditional thinking in construction isn't all inherently bad. I think, in fact, much of it exists for specific reasoning or specific reasons. I think that, the things, again, that my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather understood about, building things and building, critical infrastructure, about leading people and getting the work done, with a sense of pride and accomplishment, it's simply things that obviously you can't learn from a textbook, right? So, again, my work isn't really centered and interested in kind of throwing those things, and throwing the traditions away. I'm more interested in asking, where tradition has stopped, asking, I think, the better questions to evolve and advance, industry. And more specifically, you sit back and this isn't just exclusive to construction, but, I think construction and industry has undergone, extraordinary, technological advancements, right? I mean, we're talking about integrating AI, machine learning, even though those that are in the industry don't realize that they're in like this crux of machine learning, implementing drones and BIM and digital twins, robotics, wearables. I mean, augmented reality. The whole it's just been an enormous investment. I think, not in numerous I would say in numerous fields, but specifically industry. But yet, I think there lies an interesting paradox, right? Like, for example, I rely heavily on research, right? I read research studies like almost every day, and one that sticks out to me is McKinsey's research back in 2000, from 2000 to 2022, where global productivity just within construction improved only 10%, roughly 0.4% annually. But during that same time period, productivity across, I guess, the broader economy improved only about 50%, where manufacturing improved approximately 90%. So what that means in a broader sense, I think, is we have to ask, what if the next great innovation in construction isn't another piece of equipment or another piece of software or a software platform? What if it's the person, the individual that's operating them, the human condition, the human element, right? So I think that's where really psychology intersects with innovation, for me at least. And, it's one of the most foundational ideas behind my frameworks and my work within what I've kind of dubbed construction performance psychology, or CPP, in the broader sense. I mean, we sit here and we spent generations engineering the physical environment around the worker, and appropriately so, right? I mean, those are things that we have to understand. But we engineer the trenches, we engineer safety protocols like fall protection. We create these exclusion zones. We design, personal protective equipment, PPE, right? And we establish these procedures around engineering systems, right? Suspended loads, heavy equipment. But underneath every one of those systems is a human brain making those decisions. And again, I that's something that you can't argue. That individual, that is operating these things, may be fatigued, they may be distracted, the cognitive load might be extraordinarily high, They may be experiencing stress at home. The attentional bandwidth could be narrowing, yet the complacency exists because of that. The person may have performed specific tasks well over 500 times, and it may be routine to them, but the complacency exists for those aforementioned reasons, right? So then we hand the person a hard hat, safety glasses, and then we assume that we've adequately prepared them for the inherent risk in doing those tasks. So again, my work in construction performance psychologist asks whether we can develop psychological PPE with the same intentionality that we've developed with the physical PPE that we've developed for said workers. So, can you teach someone attentional control? Can you teach them emotional regulation? Can you teach someone to recognize when their cognitive load is beginning to exceed their available resources? Right? I mean, can we use visualization and mental rehearsal before a critical task, a critical lift, before breaking dirt and excavating, or doing a critical tie-in, or doing some type of high consequence operation? Why wouldn't we bring that same science that has protected the high performing athlete, or military, with tactical psychology? Or pilots, in human factors, in aviation. Why can't we bring those same frameworks, those same theories, that science, right, to the blue collar construction worker? I think that, again, innovation requires something else I think construction sometimes struggles with, which is the permission, I think, to challenge the way that we've always done things, right? And I think that's more of a deeper cultural issue. And herein lies the question of what we've dubbed now as psychological safety, right? Again, I fall on Amy Edmondson. I don't know if you're aware of her work, but she's done a lot of work on psychological safety, and it's extremely relevant, I think, to where we are in the industry and my work. She's advanced psychological safety and psychological safety within organizations, to endless bounds within the last 5 years, I think. But I think innovation doesn't necessarily originate from the office, right? Either. Sometimes it evolves with the people that are doing the work, from the field. Like the ideas from just the person standing with a shovel in the trench, that is making the things go. It's hard sometimes, but again, if the organizational culture communicates, don't question it, don't challenge it, and this is how we've always done it, then you potentially silence one of your greatest resources in innovation, right? Which it comes from the field. And I think that, I'm a physical, walking, breathing, example of that. So.
Beautiful. Dr. Shaw, hey, I'm looking at the next question. I'm going to read the next question. But on your end, can you check your audio a little bit? Because it's a little static. So I want to make sure, yeah. So this,
sure.
You can go ahead and listen to it as I look at it. But you mentioned the military. You mentioned the Navy. I was in the Navy, okay, and I was on a ship. And it's just getting out a little bit from what's going on. These guys, these gals, been out there for over 200-something days. Trust me, that's a long time to be out there, okay? And our bosses here, and again, I might get too deep into it because it just gets me angry. They're kind of saying they're not putting the stress on it. They're not saying they won't admit that you're being at sea, especially under that stressful conditions that they're in. It's going to lead to some mental issues. A lot of guys are jumping off the. Imagine, those carriers are huge, and there's guys jumping off the carriers because they're so mentally stressed out. Again, the reason why I'm saying that just kind of by the time as you tweak your audio, but it's the point where you mentioned cognitive load. They have a lot of cognitive load there. They have a lot of stress that they got to think about. I'm sure they don't sleep very much. I'm sure a lot of things are really high stack, and they got to go through this stuff. Get those people out of there. Get them home. There's going to be so many, when it's finally over, it's going to be so many PTSD situations when they get back. And that's a shame. And again, like I said, the war thing, I can start talking about that and then I get so angry, but we shouldn't have been in the first place. But again, it's another story. And it's a shame. Oh, it's a shame. But can you discuss the concept of cognitive high pressure? A little bit, you've already done that. What are some effective techniques you encounter that can help with? So things that people go through. Give us a couple techniques in your thoughts to how we can kind of help us through this very much of a cognitive load.
Absolutely. How's the audio now?
It's better. Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So that is a very that's a very very good question, because I believe it's really close to the heart of my work. So to better define cognitive load, I think from a practical sense, cognitive load is basically or essentially like all the things that are going around in our brains, in our head, in our minds, all at one specific time, right? So, cognitive load, it's one of the most, I think, important concepts, within construction performance psychology, just because construction's an environment where, people are consistently processing multiple streams of information at one time, right? And I sit here and I'm going to lean on abstract theory for a minute, cognitive load theory, which originated with psychologist John Sweller, right? Essentially, it recognizes that our working memory has limited capacity, right? We can't consciously process unlimited amounts of information at the same time. So when the demands placed on that specific system exceed its available capacity, the performance essentially can begin to fail or ultimately deteriorate, right? So let's put that in construction terms for a minute. Imagine there's an operator that's working around personnel that's on the ground, right? Whether it be laborers, foremen, inspectors, or any type of stakeholders, right? He has to monitor lateral utility lines within whatever he's digging, right? He has to monitor the equipment, the nonverbal hand signals that are being used by his spotters, if there's some type of radio traffic involved, changing ground utilities at the same time, and meet production expectations, right? So think of all those things going on at once, right? Or, not even think about an operator. How about those that are in charge from a leadership standpoint, like foremen, right? Coordinating multiple people at the same time, crews, inspectors, dealing with the schedules, the safety requirements that are being used within certain types of work, and even the demands of the client, right? All at the same time. And at some point, you have to sit and you have to kind of think that more information doesn't produce better decisions. It just doesn't. It can produce cognitive saturation, right? And pressure makes that particularly important because the research that I've looked at as far as stress and cognition has consistently shown, I think, that acute stress can impair specific aspects of executive functioning, including working memory and what we call cognitive flexibility. That's concerning. It should be concerning because those are precisely the capabilities I think that you need, right, when the conditions start to change, or when they suddenly change, which obviously those that are in the trades and those that are in construction understand that when you're in a high performance environment, conditions consistently change, right? And you don't know when those conditions will change. So, within construction performance psychology, one of my objectives, I think, is to reduce the unnecessary cognitive load before the critical moment occurs, right? Before that sudden moment changes and you can't think on your feet for a minute, right? Because you're so inundated with so much information and you're trying to analyze, the conditions. So, mental rehearsal, I think, is one technique. So before a high consequence or a high risk task, mentally walk through what's going to happen, right? Have a plan. Ask yourself, what's the sequence? What are the critical exposures? What could possibly change in my environment? What could change to me? And if it does change, what am I or what is my team going to do about it, right? I think another is chunking. The concept of chunking, like basically breaking down a complicated operation into smaller, more manageable sequences instead of asking someone to, mentally manage the entire operation, at the same time or just as a whole, right? I also, in the field, use process goals and attentional cues. So, like, instead of telling somebody, whether it be a laborer, foreman, operator, right, don't make a mistake, give their attention somewhere productive to go, right? Like, watch this point, maintain this distance, confirm confirm the communication, like 3 points of communication, right? Confirm the communication before actually moving a piece of equipment, right? Like, use nonverbal, incorporate the verbal, right? And then get the recognition back that that person understands that, hey, this is what I'm doing, right? Another one is breath work, right? Controlled breathing can be extremely valuable, when in physiological arousal and cognition, they're connected, right? So, sometimes taking 20 or 30 seconds to regulate yourself before making an important decision is often more productive than just reacting, like Johnny on the spot. So I think most importantly, I think organizations, and again, this is my opinion, and I'm going to fight this till the day I die probably, but I think organizations need to normalize the ability to pause. Now, there is that term, the stop work authority, right? But we're fighting production, right? For the longest time, even when I was a kid in the trade, right? I mean, it was about production. Safety was kind of like an afterthought. It was go, 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 right? We're not going to stop production. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep moving, right? That old, the mental toughness and the mental the resilience, right? The grit, all that stuff that construction taught you back then, was part of production. But now we've kind of gotten away from, like, hey, sometimes we need to reset, right? We need to stop, we need to recalibrate and move forward. And when we sometimes, basically what I'm trying to say is, sometimes we confuse speed with performance because they're not the same thing. They're not. If someone's cognitive load is becoming excessive to some point, I want them to be empowered. I want them to say, essentially, hey, give me a second, let's stop, let's reassess this, right? Rather than thinking that there's going to be some type of punitive action because they've done so, right? So I think that, ultimately, it's about maintaining access, I think, to cognitive resources that are being used in other high-pressure environments like sports psychology, right? I mean, you have these multi-million-dollar athletes that spend a significant amount of money towards enhancing mental skills, right? That are, and then again, like I've mentioned before with military, right, with tactical psychology, you have psychologists and clinicians now being intertwined into what's considered the mind gym with these special ops guys, right? And part of that is learning the arousal control, learning self-regulation, right? But we are literally decades behind in that connection with construction because, again, I argue that construction is a very high performing environment because it is. And I think it's probably the highest performing environment in the world. And I think it's been overlooked by behavioral scientists and those within academia and researchers because it's not attractive, right? It's just looked at as normal work, like it's blue collar, right? And that's my argument that, we can sit here and we can argue about the mental health crisis within construction, which is huge, right? Which is another conversation for another time. But again, you look at including clinicians, like how can we, and I think CPP opens the door for bringing in specialists, to help contribute to not cure, but, mitigate some of these issues within construction. So anyway, but at the end of the day, you can't eliminate pressure. Right, complexity and uncertainty from high pressured work is always going to exist. But I think that we can train the people that are doing the work to manage the cognitive resources more effectively when those conditions basically appear. And I think creating enough cognitive space for somebody to actually think for themselves. So,
Sammy, thank you for sharing that. Real quick, because you had me thinking when it comes to construction and cognitive thinking, stuff like that. How do you talk to, real quick, I mean, something that's off the cuff here, because I'm out here in Tempe, Arizona, and the next 2 days it's going to be 112, 113, 114. How do you sit there as the foreman and say, okay, guys, I know it's hot, but we got to do this. How do you get them prepared to go out there and do something where it's so stinking hot. I mean, I sometimes hate going outside because it's so hot. You walk outside your house, it's like walking into an oven. And these guys know they got to be out there 8 to 12 hours in
Right.
this heat. You as a supervisor, you out here in the heat, how do you get these guys psyched up mentally to do what they have to do? Real quickly.
So, obviously there's two different I mean, there's two places where we can where I can respond from the application or practicality, or from theory, right? So theory is more internal, external motivation. That's more of a classroom discussion. But from a practical standpoint, in my opinion, is we have these heat illness prevention plans. We have cooling trailers now. Consistent hydration. They put up posters now where like in the portable restrooms of how you can monitor like basically the color of your urine, right? Of like whether or not you're dehydrated and what you need to do, right? So there's all these controls, right? Of trying to mitigate what could potentially happen when working. But from a motivational standpoint, I think that I lean on two things, right? One, leadership. Two is crew cohesion or team cohesion, right? So the closer that a crew or a team organization, and I'm sure that you can agree with me on this because obviously you're an athlete as well, and obviously from the military, same thing, right? The cohesion piece, right? It's like going into war, going into a battle, or going into a game, right? The mentality of like, hey, it's all or none, right? And you don't lead from the back, and you don't stand up on a mound and you preach to the choir. Like, you have to lead from the front, right? And I lean on the movie 300, right, with the Spartans, right? I mean, you have your leaders that are pushing out, hey, we're basically going to run to our deaths, right? But I'm with you, right? This sense of I'm with you. I'm not sitting on a ivory tower, and I'm not going to say things that I'm not going to have follow through with, right? Like, I'm going to be out in the heat with you, right? Whether I'm digging or not, or whether I'm sitting around or not, I'm with you, right? I'm in the field, right? And I think that's a disconnect, not only within industry. I mean, that's everywhere, right? I mean, that's everywhere, right? I mean, you sit there and one of the biggest complaints as you're working is like, oh, that person doesn't understand what I'm going through. Like, that person has never been through this. This person doesn't know that, and rightfully so, right? I mean, I think as for me at least, I've been blessed for both, like in both worlds, right? Where I'm in the administrative sense now. I'm in the world of academia, but you know what? I did the work, right? I know the work. I've done it, right? I grew up in it. Like it runs through my veins, right? And that's a blessing. I don't look at it like a curse. But essentially, to answer your question, it's about leadership and it's about cohesion. So you need to sit back and think, how can we establish better leadership? What does better leadership look like, not only individually but organizationally, right? Because that produces obviously better production. But also, how do we establish cohesion? And what does that really look like? Is it healthy? Is it not? Right? So,
Outstanding. Perfect. Okay, before we continue, please tell us where do we go after the show to learn more about you, tell us about your website, where can we get your books, get more, because you got so much knowledge to share. I want people to go and follow up with you and get some information. So where do we go?
thanks, Hollis. See, so this is where I'm kind of cut off at the knees, right? I unplugged a long time ago, right? So when it comes to social media, it may not be the best marketing decision that I've ever made in my life, but I have an X account, a Twitter account at cshaw45, where it's more for coaching for sports. But LinkedIn, I have a LinkedIn account, so that's my primary platform. As far as my work, you go on Amazon, right? I use Amazon, so just hop on Amazon and type in my name, Dr. Braxton B. Shaw, and all of my works pop up. I have 6 published works, 2 volumes that are now complete, which I'm proud to say, and which was a heavy lift and took years of just putting together of construction performance psychology. So I have volume 1 and volume 2. The distinction between the two was, volume 1 is establishing the frameworks, the science and theories. the parallels from different performance psychological areas, and then volume 2 is more of the practical piece that addresses maladaptive behaviors, that addresses addiction, burnout, that addresses the mental health piece, right, within construction. And together, it's my framework in science. So Amazon and LinkedIn.
Perfect.
So.
Final comments, sir. Okay. Why the future of work must remain fundamentally human-centered? Okay, so that's a big one. Because again, with the AI stuff, and I do use AI a lot myself, okay, so I'm an advocate of AI, but why is it so fundamentally strong and important to continue as humans, that stuff? I mean, to me, a person who's kind of sit there and say, oh, AI, no, is really kind of kidding themselves. I think a person who says, okay, AI is here, how can I adapt my work to adjust to AI, continue my career as an important person, even with AI there, or a person who kind of ignores it is going to get left behind. Because I study it a lot, I research it a lot, I listen to a lot of things, and people who ignore it are the ones who's going to get left behind. What's your thoughts with the future of work, real quickly, in closing?
So I mean, oh gosh, this question has gotten me into a lot of trouble. But it's also developed, a space for conversation as well. I feel, pretty strongly about, not. So you have to kind of break it up into different rooms, right? I think. Technology is the house, and then obviously the technology that's being incorporated into not only industry but just within our culture and in our society is differentiated. So just the AI alone, right? I personally, I think that artificial intelligence, AI, I think it's very overhyped, right? I think that it's extremely overhyped. I think that there's a use for it. I believe that it's a tool. I believe that machine learning is coupling human with software, or human with said AI tool, and produce a better product. I believe in that. I do. But to be completely solely reliant on, there are so many studies going on right now with incorporating human performance and AI, where I believe that AI is not infallible, right? Obviously it makes huge mistakes, right? So another part of what I am and what I do is I like to say that I'm a creative as well. I write. I write 99.9% of my day is spent in front of a computer, and I'm consistently editing, I'm consistently writing, and I can't say that I don't use AI. I do as a tool, right? But one of the most funnest things to do, and so again, there are, like, I'm a big case study person, and I follow 3 different individuals, Stephen Kotler, Peter Diamandis, and Elon Musk, right? Those are the 3 guys that I follow right now in contemporary society, and because they are on the cusp of deciding and explaining where AI is and where technology is. But one of the funnest things that I like to do sometimes is I like, if you sit down, whatever platform you use, whether it's Trixie, whether it's Claude, whether ChatGPT, right, and ask it to write you something, right, and then let anything. And then sit back and then kind of digest the response, right? It's just filled with so much crud, right? It's cruddy. I don't know how to explain it. It's very rigid. It just doesn't make sense. It's not very humanistic. It's very detached. AI likes to respond to the middle, to the mean, to the average. There's no higher order thinking to it, right? It can't think for itself. We haven't gotten to the point of AGI, right? I mean, there are these notions that, AI will become regenerative, right? It will be able to have a salience, right, to have consciousness, right? There's all this craziness, paranoia out there, right? But what I think that essentially leads to is my argument, right? Is that AI, so again, here's the perfect example, and I'll end it with this, right? You look 10 years ago, and the argument around construction was that the trades are dying,
right? No, but like all the vocational programs are starting to become non-existent in high schools anymore. The wood shops, the welding, the metalwork, the carpentry, all of those vocational skills are becoming non-existent in high schools, right? In public education. Some may exist, like auto shop may, but for the most part, the widespread what we remember, back, I'm an '80s '90s kid, so like they existed back then, right? Because everybody knew that, oh well, college might not be for you, so you're going to go into the workforce. A lot of kids nowadays, this generation, with 10 years ago, like nobody wanted to go into the trades because everybody was running to what we called soft work, right, or smart work. They wanted to go into computing, into coding, into information technology. Well, what's funny is now you fast forward 10 years, right? And the Frankenstein that they built, the monster that they built in AI, is now coming for those jobs. It's wiping out the data entry, the moving information from one cell to another. Anything that's computer-based is starting to go away because AI is now taking away these mundane tasks, right? And so now it's driving these college graduates back where? Back into industry. So now it's starting to change the culture and the look of industry because these kids that are coming from college have been preconditioned and conditioned about soft skills, about how culture looks, about how certain protocols are, right? And now culture, I don't think the esoteric culture within construction is ready for that. But the faces are starting to change because as these older guys are starting to retire and walk off job sites, the experience walks with them, right? Because it's not handed down sometimes, but also the way in which we do things and the expectations are starting to rise, and it's starting to come from these kids with college degrees that are walking into an industry where it was kind of like a fallback, right? Which is, I think, is a good thing. I think it's a really good thing. But my argument is that AI is now making the human stock, the human condition, the human element that is within construction, that powers machines, the atoms moving atoms, the matter moving matter, the people that are swinging the hammers, that are digging the ditches, that are making the connections, that are welding, that are making the calculations, right? That stock is now just rising through the roof because AI is now just crashing all these other mundane, what we consider soft, smart jobs. It's now flooding humans back into hard work. So, why not pour into not only conditioning or training or protecting or conditioning, the human element or the human condition, and at the center of that's the human mind. So that's my argument.
Dr. Shaw, everybody. Dr. Shaw, thank you so much for sharing your information with us. You're awesome. We would definitely follow you. We're going to follow you on Amazon. We're going to follow you whatever things you do because you are a good read. You are a wonderful for our society. Thank you very much, sir. You keep in touch. Love to have you back. And we'll talk to you real soon, sir.
Thank you, Hollis. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Authors and small business owners, turn your book and/or your business into a streaming television brand. You wrote the book, you built the business. Now it's time to be seen on Roku and Amazon Fire Television. The Hollis Chapman Show helps authors and small business owners get featured on a professionally produced TV show, appear on Roku and Amazon Fire Television streaming platforms, build authority and credibility, reach new audiences beyond social media, receive in-house marketing support. This isn't just an interview. This is brand positioning. If you're serious about in 2026, let's put your brand on television. Appy now for a featured television plus podcast spotlight. Book your strategy email today.
Okay, everybody. That was a great show with Dr. Shaw. Okay, we had some audio issues there, so we're going to work on that and correct that, but we'll definitely put that posted. Follow up with Dr. Shaw. Intelligent, smart man, okay? You can kind of see some things in the future. Construction base, he's got his hands dirty and stuff growing up, played some sports like I did, so that's really cool too. But thank you very much for joining us today. And oh, yes, tomorrow, we have a special show tomorrow too, so join us tomorrow on the Hollis Chapman Show. And as always, I'll see you next time.